So Tony,
I'm
you and
losing you.
me are.
Sorry, I lost you.
नहीं मुझे छोड़ना मत, मुझे छोड़ना मत. Don't lose me.
Leftover lasagna.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by
my
Nitin
charge
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagna, the podcast that's like a 60-minute spa session that you stumbled into on a Wednesday evening because you had a meh work week. You went into it because you had an hour to kill and you didn't want to look at other humans, but you emerged from it pleasantly surprised with a smile on your face, a mellow buzz in your head, and without realizing it, you wish a chirpy good evening and flash a smile at the lift man even as he presses the wrong button. With me is the man who always pushes the right buttons, the man who knows the opposite amount of pressure to apply and the best patterns to draw on your skin to put you at ease. And just as you think he is about to make you peak, he will switch to a completely different part and pattern. The tease who knows how to ensure the sensuous doesn't cross over to the sexual. The masseuse loved by missuses. They shower him with Hershey's kisses because he never misses. Please give a big hand to Nitin Sundar. Say hi.
Hello. Hi.
And I am Tony, the aromatic candle that lights the room with a perfect mood and emanates a fragrance you will long since recall on a lonely winter night. Hidden away in a corner and burning myself so others feel better, forever hoping his pod partner will someday return the hype. Wait, this part was for therapy, not aroma. The human candle who has a wick running down his whole body, the wicked Tony Sebastian. Say hi to me. Hi.
Very modest. Now that you've spoken about fragrance and all, maybe we should switch to channel number 5. Do you realize it has been 32 episodes of Leftover Lasagna and you come up with very, very colorful, beautiful intros? Yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to return the hype. No, but after 32 episodes of colorful intros from Tony, I doubt whether any of our listeners have any idea what this podcast is about. Much like ourselves. And a detailed spiel you give at the top, try to explain what it is. What is it? It is a spa treatment on a Wednesday, an unexpected spa treatment which somewhere ended, and that intro ended with someone pressing the wrong lift buttons. Which reminds me of my visit to your house last year, or the year before last, where I spent a couple of minutes inside your lift, vexed because I could not find the buttons. And the buttons were distributed on both sides of the lifts. If any of you thoughtful listeners have ever been in a lift which has buttons on both sides, please let us know in the comments, because I've seen it only in one place, and that's where Tony Sebastian lives.
I think at some point you should be an RJ or something because you hate dead air, right? So what you end up doing is just like putting out a stream of consciousness, as our friend PGK observed. LOL is not a podcast; it is the mind map of Tony and Nitin. And nothing is more accurate, except I'd probably say it is the mental makeup of you and I. So much so that even our mind needs makeup to be palatable to the outside world. Like,
all the more reason to go into a spa on a Wednesday evening.
yeah. Dude, why? It's a perfect analogy, man. Like it's not a planned thing that you do. Not a happy ending.
Absolutely. Not a happy ending. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. So, Tony, episode number 32. The broad theme for this episode, and I'm going to
Okay, once again, let me say why I'm laughing. It's because Nitin uncharacteristically pinged me the other day saying, you know what, our episodes have now become, so broad to the point of being vague. This time I'm going to come with a sharp theme and topic so we can explore in greater detail. And the opening line is that the broad theme.
Right.
Yeah. So the broad theme is specifically about everything, right? That is what it is.
But this podcast is not everything is everything. For that, please go to another podcast.
Also, I just wanted to tell you that you've called it episode 32, but it's actually episode 33, which is the 34th episode.
Okay. The broad theme for this episode, like I said, Tony, you and me are huge fans of cinema, right? Our listeners who might not know, Tony Sebastian is a huge fan of the movie Premalu, which features a very special character called Amal Davis, who's very famous catchline from the film is, "See, no one cares." And that is the t-shirt that Tony is wearing. So Tony cares a lot about cinema, especially Malayalam cinema. I watch a lot of cinema as well. At one stage in my life, I used to host a cinema podcast, and hopefully we'll get back to it at some point again.
Yeah. The intermission podcast has reached the intermission of itself.
It has reached
So
its
this is
interval
very
block.
meta.
Yeah. And we've all gone out for a
Yeah.
fag.
I just want to clarify that I am not like, same as cricket. I'm not a technical cinema watcher, right? It's just that I, on average, feel about things more than the average person. And the things I feel about, I expound a lot about without necessarily understanding the nuances. So I am your average cinema goer with an above average appetite for Malayalam cinema. Let's put it.
Correct. There is no average, above average cinema goer and all. The only way you can quantify.
Everyone is above average.
The only way you can quantify a cinema goer's range is by the quantity of cinema that they watch, right? And because quality is very nebulous, right? It doesn't really matter. And
Right.
Tony, I believe this is true for you. You live in Bombay. I mean, that of course is true for you. But when you manage to figure out the lift buttons in your lift, watch at least one film in the theaters every couple of weeks, if not every week. And typically Malayalam film,
Yeah.
right? Which is a lot. For someone who lives in Bombay to be going and watching Malu films, and I think South Indians, it's true that in general are very, very crazy about their cinema, right? Telugus and Tamils especially. Malayalis are not that crazy about their cinema, right? As much as their neighboring states. But Tony would be an outlier there because he's actually crazy about Malayalam cinema to the extent that in this age of OTT likes to go out and watch a movie once a week or once every couple of weeks. I'm a lot like that as well, except that I don't restrict myself to Malayalam cinema, though of late, the quantity or the percentage of Malayalam films I've been watching has gone up significantly. Both of us happen to be Malayalis, but I had the fortune or misfortune, as Tony might say, of growing up in Chennai. So I was exposed quite a bit to Tamil cinema as well, right? And I would say Tamil cinema had a far bigger impact on me growing up than Malayalam cinema, which I was exposed to a little lesser. But Tony is not a very big fan of Tamil cinema or whatever little bit of it he's watched. And the broad theme for this episode, of course, coming back to the broad theme, is these two states or these two cultures, languages separated by a thin border in the southern tip of India.
Yeah.
Movies really are a barometer for pop culture, right? I would say if you were to take the movies from these two respective states as barometers for what the people of these states really are about, they are like chalk and cheese, right? And that's what we wanted to explore in this episode. How can two people separated by barely any distance be so different from each other? And what does that say about people, about culture, about language, about cinema, and about Tony and me? So Tony, why don't you tell us what makes Malayalam cinema special and what makes Tamil cinema irascible and incorrigible?
Hey, I don't think it's a two states kind of thing, right? It is.
That would
I
be
think
North
very
India and
specific
South India,
to
two states,
me.
like me and my wife. Yeah, she's from UP and I'm from Tamil Nadu.
Correct.
Yeah, Chetan Bhagat represent.
Yeah.
Go on.
I think it is probably very specific to me as a movie watcher. And my other famous rant against movies is about all superhero movies, right? Which practically every movie is the same, right? Is that I am the kind of movie goer who cannot keep his brains home and go and watch a movie, right? And this is not true of the larger audience, and rightly so. In fact, friends all around me are like, why the fuck not, right? You can enjoy a intelligent movie as much as you can enjoy a superhero movie, as much as you can enjoy, I don't know, Surya Vanshi 34 or whatever that number is, or Dabang 7, one of these, right? Like, why should everything be intellectual is a different question. But to me, probably grown up being influenced by Malayalam cinema, which I think the reason is that it's always been writer first, right? Which means the logic for the plot and the logic of everything comes first, and then there is a directorial layer on top of it, right? This is changing now, but largely it means that I've always admired movies which has absolutely flawless or solid writing in it, right? So much so that I'm guessing we'll discuss it at some point. Drishyam and Drishyam 2. When Drishyam 2 was being made, I was like, man, there is no way this will, result in anything meaningful. Except he somehow extricated himself out of it.
Drishyam, of course, is a film that doesn't matter which part of the country you're from, or if you're from Korea, you probably watched some version of that film in some language that you know of. Drishyam 2 is where the main character, played by Mohanlal, continues to hoodwink the law after having. Spoiler alert for Drishyam here, in case you haven't watched Drishyam. If you are one of those three people, it's very possible that you are one of those three people, because somehow, your YouTube algorithm has brought you to leftover lasagna before it brought you to Drishyam.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at the Venn diagrams this person has to pass through for this to be a spoiler for them. One is that they've never heard of Drishyam or watched anything in any of the multiple languages it has been made in, or the Devotion of Suspect X, or any of those.
Yeah.
Then they are looking at what podcast they can consume
And they landed up here.
or music or anything else. And they've landed up here for the very first time. And they've passed a crazy intro, a part where we are debating what episode number this is, and moved past the first stage to actually continue to. If you are here, dear listener, you've earned this point. Congratulations. You should go out and take a lottery ticket today.
I'll tell you, this is what happened, right? That person, whoever that person is, was on YouTube. YouTube was throwing them a lot of popular suggestions on what they can consume. And that person just put his hands up and they see, no one cares what I'm watching. And guess where they landed? So they landed here.
Let me walk into this spa on a random Wednesday afternoon and see what massage they're offering.
And hopefully I'll get a happy ending.
Yeah.
No, so Drishyam 2, and now there is Drishyam 2 came during the pandemic. It did reasonably well. It was a OTT release because it came during the pandemic. And now they are working on Drishyam 3, which is again directed by the same director. What's his name? Jitu Joseph, starring Mohanlal one more time.
And I love that meme that came with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Why don't you tell us what the meme is?
Basically, the photo is of Anthony Perumbavoor, who was the producer of Drishyam. He started out as Mohanlal's driver, then got into production. So a great success story there.
Oh, okay.
Mohanlal and Jitu Joseph on his right, standing together, saying, Mohanlal tweeting out, "The past never stays silent. Drishyam 3 confirmed." And there's a Twitter user who basically quote tweeted it saying, "Honestly, I just confess and go to jail at this point." Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which feels about right. Yeah. No, so just to ground what I was saying in Drishyam, right? And I think that's a good universal example because there have been many versions of it. Not to forget that the original plot has, of course, by and large, I guess 80% the meat of it has been inspired by Devotion of Suspect X. And here is something that most people may not have realized, that was actually adapted into a Hindi movie recently called Jani Jan, I think set in Darjeeling or one of those places. And it passed by without anyone noticing it, right? Like,
correct.
Despite having like Kareena Kapoor in it and all of that.
Yeah.
And here is why I feel like what makes Malayalam cinema is that Jitu took the script, which he claims he did, of course he did, and he elevated it, right? One is he found a more elegant solution, end solution than the one that is there in Devotion of Suspect X. Obviously set in Japan, where it might be that, you accept that clinical kind of solution where a man is actually killed. As opposed to in this one, how he frames that is super elegant. The second part is if you see Drishyam, the entire first half doesn't need to exist, right? But he's written it so that he creates the effect of you actually feeling like you're part of this family that is set in a distant place that is very different from yours. And you understand, you empathize, you fall in love with them so much that you have no choice but to root for them, despite your morality saying what they're doing is inherently wrong, right? And this is the nub of why I love Malayalam cinema, is that it's not emotional manipulation, where what I hate about by and large Tamil cinema or other things is that there will be like either a woman getting raped or a child getting sexually assaulted, etc., where it puts you into this mode of righteous vengeance to say it is black and white, right? Like the other side is completely evil and they need to be eradicated. Whereas why I love Malayalam cinema by and large, or the good movies, is that every character is grey, like real life grey, right? And whose side you are on largely depends on who you're close to, right? And therefore Jitu crafts this entire first half to make sure that this is the side that you feel empathy to, because you're part of their daily life, you're part of their daily jokes, even the subtle sexual ones between a man and his wife, in middle age with two kids in a place where they're not necessarily, doing it day in day out in that sense, right? But there are subtle jokes there as well, and it just puts you in that wholesome mood where you're saying, yes, this is great, but I know where whom I'm supporting, and the claps at the end are testimony to that, right? If you had
Yeah.
watched Drishyam in a theater, there would have been a definite point where a clap erupted, and you know exactly where it is, and that's only because of this, right? And that's the difference: black and white versus gray, and I love gray.
Brilliant. Tony, so multiple threads I want to pick up from that. Starting from the very first thing that you
Double click on.
Starting on the very first thing you said, which is that it is not about two states or about two cinemas, it is more about your preference as an individual. First, I'd like to point out it is not just your preference, right? Because Malayalam cinema is doing really well right now. Because Malayali is by and large, and lots of people now, thanks to OTT and subtitles, lots of people from outside Kerala also have voted with their feet for Malayalam cinema, right? And you said one of the reasons you like Malayalam cinema is because it doesn't have the greater man syndrome and the writing takes the center stage over the superheroes. Do you realize that when you said that this is about you and your own preference as a movie fan, you actually framed yourself as one of those individualistic superheroes who has a very distinctive taste?
Yeah, of course.
Which is by the way not true also. Which is what I wanted to say, because Malayalam cinema really is enjoying a moment in the sunlight, thankfully, which it has long deserved. In fact, lots of people are watching the current Malayalam cinema, right? And Drishyam probably is, I would say, one of the first films in that current new wave that we are talking about, right? And Mohanlal really is not anywhere close to being the flag bearer of that wave. But let's say Jeetu Joseph, to some extent, is maybe. I wouldn't really qualify him because Drishyam was, I think, a flash in the pan, because everything that has followed since then from him has been okay, and largely it's been diminishing returns. But this entire era of Malayalam cinema, which is writer driven, like you're saying, is actually not the first time Malayalam cinema was like this, right? It has always been that way. I think the 70s, 80s, which is when Mohanlal and Mammootty became huge stars, not because they were playing larger than life star figures, was because they were acting in films that were written so beautifully. And there were great directors, great writers, Padmarajan and Bharatan and Lohit Das and all these great writer directors from Kerala who did a fantastic job. And then I think that industry kind of went off the rails somewhere in the early 2000s, and thankfully now has come back. Yeah.
Two things that I want to sort of lay down there broadly, right? And you have to probably tell us the Tamil version of this. Is that obviously it was not a time of plenty or anything like that, right? And Malayalam cinema largely drove on the fact that life is pretty terrible, right? For the common man, if he's seeking a job, if he's looking for, whatever his common struggles are, finding a mate, wanting to marry outside of caste or creed or religion, all of these are everyday battles, and largely, people fail, right? And so most of the writing has been around this, and then there are little moments of joy in between, right? Most of the writing has been to focused on this reality, right? And if you'll see any of those movies, why, like you said, Mohanlal and Mammootty became stars is because they played those everyman characters, right? And which also means that there were never a real superhero per se, as opposed to the Tamil one. And the second part that I want to say is Malayalam is probably one industry from which no political heroes emerge. Right?
Yeah.
Even the chocolate boy or the superstar Prem Nasir, who once stood for elections, lost his deposit.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Tamil always has had that idea of superheroes, whether it's Jayalalitha or MGR and all of these people who've sort of moved from cinema to then politics, as it were. Right? So tell us the Tamil side of what it was like at that point.
The best way to kind of talk about the Tamil cinema angle here is to talk about the Tamil version of Drishyam, right? Which the first part of Drishyam was remade in Hindi, in Kannada, in Telugu, and in Tamil. And in, I think in every other language, the film that was made was actually again called Drishyam, right? Except in Tamil. In Tamil, the film was called Papanasam, right? And Papanasam literally means absolving yourself of your sins. Paap ko nash karna, right? So I don't know why I'm explaining in Hindi on a podcast that's about Tamil and Malayalam. So Papanasam is a river that flows in Tamil Nadu, where this is the Kumbh season that we are in. We can always reference that. Like, people from Tamil Nadu go to that river to wash away their sins, right? And this film, the family, the protagonist family, is set in that village right by the banks of the Papanasam. The film largely follows the exact same story. And by the way, also the Tamil version was directed by Jeetu Joseph. I don't think any of the other versions were directed by Jeetu himself, right? So Jeetu Joseph directed the Tamil version. And the person who starred in the film was Kamal Haasan, right? And people who have heard this podcast before know that I have a huge adoration for Kamal Haasan. When Kamal Haasan comes into a project, he doesn't typically come in just as an actor, right? He comes in as one of the directorial voices. He comes in as someone who is more on the executive production side itself. And there are countless movies. In fact, he is a writer himself, since you spoke about how stories are the king when it comes to Malayalam cinema. But I must also say, since this is broadly a conversation about Tamil cinema and about Tamil Nadu, Kamal Haasan is a massive outlier, right? He is not really representative of that industry at all. But that said, this was a very actorly role. This really was the comeback of sorts for Mohanlal, who was going through a bit of a dip right after his glory years. And he shot right back into popularity with this very actorly role, very actorly performance of this smart, country educated, not school educated guy who goes to whatever length he has to protect his family, and then is very cold blooded about what he did, right? And is able to hold that mask on to ensure that his family goes away scot free, even when he is confronted by the law, by the people whose family he had supposedly wronged, etc. Now, when Kamal Haasan came in to do the Tamil version of this film, he was very clear he did not want to do he did not want this to be a piece by piece remake of the Malayalam Drishyam, right? And he managed to convince the director. The characterization of the protagonist in Tamil is actually quite different, right? Backstory, the reason why he has a different character, one is Kamal Haasan does not want to again do what Mohanlal did because he wants to stand out, right? And this goes back to your point about the greater man and the singular hero. Kamal Haasan did not want to be someone doing exactly what was already done. He wanted to do it his way so that this film can stand on its own legs. But what the change that he makes is the person Swayambulingam, right? And George Kutti's character in Tamil is called Swayambulingam. He is as much, very similar to the other guy, very similar to Mohanlal in the Malayalam version. He's someone who has been trained in life by watching movies, right? And it's great that we are talking about this movie because in this movie, the protagonist becomes a smart person by watching movies, right? He runs a video cassette shop, literally, in both versions. Now, you would imagine that Swayambulingam sitting in Tamil Nadu, unlike George Kutti sitting in Kerala, would have watched a lot more Tamil films than Malayalam films.
Correct.
In order to change his worldview, right? And there's an interesting question here of whether culture is a reflection of the people or people are a reflection of the culture. And it's a very important question to ask over here because Kamal Haasan, the writer, imbues Swayambulingam, the character, whose worldview is shaped by cinema, into a person who is a lot more emotional and a lot more on the nose with his emotions than Mohanlal is in the Malayalam version. And you see this right through the film that this guy is a little more emotional, a little more over the top in the way he expresses himself. It all comes to a head in the last scene of the film, right?
So Mohanlal is basically, you're saying, stoic and clinical.
Exactly.
Whereas Kamal Haasan is a bit more emotional and
exactly. He's not stoic.
Sentimental.
He's sentimental. I don't know if you saw that video that I shared with you, which explains how the various movie industries did the last scene differently, right? Or not so differently. Yeah. But mainly, you could really focus and zero in on how Mohanlal played the last scene versus how Kamal Haasan played the last scene. In the Malayalam version, Mohanlal is confronted by the parents whose son has died and has disappeared. And they know that he has done it. They know he's gotten away with it, but they want closure. So they come to him to ask him what exactly happened, right? And he tells them whatever he has to tell them. But he does it without ever letting that mask go. You can see that he's a cold-blooded motherfucker on his face because he's done this. He knows that he's gotten away with it. But he also has that grain of that grain of sympathy in his mind. He knows that at the end of the day, it was a murder, right? And he knows that these parents want closure. So he gives them that closure without giving them anything more than that. And the way that scene finally ends is where the camera actually zooms in into the eyes of Mohanlal as those two parents walk away after knowing what has happened. And he blinks his eyes. And this is one of the famous scenes from that film where, it starts and ends with the protagonist blinking and opening his eyes, right? He blinks his eye and you see one tear roll down from Mohanlal's eyes. Now, in the Tamil version, the same scene is replayed. Kamal Haasan plays this role very, very differently, like I said, right? By the time they've started asking him what has happened, he is already a blubbering mess. You can see that while he did what he had to do to save his family, it has taken a huge toll on him to the extent that he knows that what he's committed is a sin. He knows that yes, he did it for his family, but he's not able to reconcile with the fact that there are a couple of parents in front of him who don't have that closure, whose child has actually been taken away, regardless of what happened to him. And he's dealing with that guilt. He's literally asking them for forgiveness in that final scene. And you should see the way he's played that scene, right? And you might either find that scene over the top or extremely moving, especially if you have lived with that character
No, I
throughout.
think it is set up in that video you shared. It is
Yeah.
set up by Kamal basically telling the wife that I brought up two girls, telling them you should always tell the truth, and now I
Yes.
am the one sort of lying to protect them, right? So that conflict is always writ large in his mind, saying,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
how do I resolve
Absolutely. And the tears are flowing, right? And if you see the other versions of the film, of course, Ajay Devgan plays the film in Hindi. Ajay Devgan is perfect for this role because I don't think he knows how to emote, right? I've seen a lot of Ajay Devgan movies where he's just there. I think the only time you get an emotion out of Ajay
the
Devgan
pan
is...
has numbed his.
Yeah, the only way you can get an emotion out of Ajay Devgan is to, shake a packet of Vimal Pan Masala sachet in front of him. That probably gets him excited about life. And the lesser said about the Kannada and Telugu versions, which we don't want to get into, the better.
Yeah.
But this one was very different. So only the Tamil version is set on the banks of that river because the movie's name itself comes from that.
Papanasam, yeah.
He literally turns to the river and says, I've committed a grave sin. I know that I've wronged you. I hope that for the rest of my life, I'll be able to absolve myself of the sin by going and taking a holy dip in this river. And he turns and he's literally praying to the river and to these parents as they walk away. Right now, what you said about Tamil cinema and about Malayalam cinema, right, totally neatly fit into everything that we have discussed so far because Kamal Haasan changed the script, changed the characterization of the actor. Kamal Haasan changed the script and the characterization of this character in order to stand out as a hero because that is what he does. That is what he wants to do. Whereas Mohanlal is the quintessential director's actor, right? He's never done anything other than acting in films. And he's like putty, right? Mohanlal, without actually changing too much of his body language or the way he looks, etc., is so good at being a director's actor and bringing out exactly what the character needs to do. Kamal Haasan is that guy who will wear like 100 different makeups, will change his weight, will change his body gait, will change his accent, the way he speaks, etc., for every single character he does. Because having to stand out and being that greatest man, since he is catering to an audience that appreciates those kinds of flourishes, has shaped who he is as an actor. I buy your point, by the way, that Malayalam cinema has stood its ground because it is very much rooted in realism, right? The gray shades you spoke about, the fact that there is no single man hero in life is all very realistic, right? And it's not something that that any of the other movie industries sort of have adapted. The reasons you gave, by the way, you said, okay, it was a time of hardship. It was a time of hardship for the entire country, right? All these movie industries sort of came out at the same time. What I really want to go into is also, why did Malayalam cinema alone evolve in a slightly different trajectory?
No great revelations here. Again, like it'll probably be lazy tropes. But I want to open with another great movie. Again, a great writer who's done like different movies, right? Is Radish Balakrishna Poduval. And I think it is his third movie, which is Nathan Kesudu or Sumi, as it's called. And there is this point where these guys are trying to get the minister's nephew to sort of help them out, right? And he is someone who's studying in the US, but also comes to Kerala and stays and stuff like that. And he's about to leave for the airport when they confront him. Now, the interesting part here is you will notice that this guy has hired an Etios to go to the airport, and it's a fairly remote place. And he sits in the front seat, okay, along with the driver, right? Now, outside, I mean, once I stepped outside of Kerala, and probably now it's not really true of the generations now, I didn't realize that this is not a done thing anywhere else, right? So, basically, how we've always grown up is that I'm guessing this is back to the communism, socialism framework of things where irrespective of the job that you do, everyone's a comrade, right? Which means that if ever we've taken a cab or whoever the driver is, mostly my dad would sit in the front seat, right? Or I will sit in the front seat. Not because there aren't enough seats in the back, but because he's a part of your this thing, right? And if you stop for tea, he either sits at the same table or the table adjacent, and you pay for basically the same thing, right? Like there is no distinction to say you're a driver, go figure out your own thing, or etc. etc. Nor will that driver accept that he is different from you, right? Because at the end of the day, he's doing a job which has a certain distinct to it, which means that everyone in that sense, irrespective of the job that they do, the role that they paid for, etc., are considered equals, right? Which means there cannot be a larger than life figure, because what will happen is that Malayalis are people who can speak any language, but the language that they speak best is sarcasm, right? So if there is someone who tries to go out of this mold and say I am someone special, you will be cut down with 1,000 barbs, right? Like you can notice it in the tropes that play out in you, and especially if you check Suresh Gobi memes, you will find how he's been cut down to size so much by Malayalis who do not, think this is possible, right? Or Malayali fandom for a Srishant versus a Sanju Samson is different specifically for this reason, right? So Srishant is a special talent who knows he's special, who can land the ball with immaculate same position once in a lifetime kind of thing. Sanju is also a generational talent, but everyone loves Sanju. Most Malayalis hate Srishant for this exact same reason, that you cannot say you're bigger than whatever, right? And sarcasm is necessarily the thing, and humor is what you get out of it. And I think, it is not that film shape culture, it is that films are shaped by culture, right? And basically the zeitgeist of being a Malayali is this understanding that you cannot portray yourself to be larger than anyone because you'll be cut down.
So no, I agree, but I'll
Yeah.
question you, right? I mean, the communism angle is obvious, right? And why that might mean that Kerala is a bit different. At the same time, while all of what you said is true, Kerala is also one of the most casteist places in India, right?
Yeah.
Which again flies in the face of everything you said about the equality between different people, the labor class and the people sitting. Dowry continues to be one of a huge problem in Kerala. In fact, if you go back and see why, and as part of this episode I was trying to understand why Kerala has that connection with the Gulf, right, where lots of people in the 70s and 80s specifically from Kerala moved to the Gulf and not so much from the other parts of India. One of the reasons they went was because the Gulf is known for gold, and gold was very important to marry off your daughters and continues to be very important to marry off your daughters. Now, some of these tropes, right, these regressive tropes that you see in other parts of India are very strongly there in Kerala as well, right? And if you look at the film The Great Indian Kitchen, which now has been adapted, and the Hindi version has also been garnering rave reviews. I've seen a few scenes from the Hindi version. I haven't seen the entire film, right? It's about basically domestic abuse of a woman who's been married off into a family by patriarchy itself. While the settings are different, right? While it is not a rasam, it is not a sambar, instead it's a motichur laddu or whatever that she's making. The story or the travails of the woman in the family that she's been married off into are very similar to what was portrayed in the Malayalam version. What you could say is, of course, Kerala now, the Kerala pop culture moment has reached a level of self-awareness where it is able to tell these stories and be very self-critical and actually put it out there to an extent which the other parts of the country aren't.
I mean, I would say Malayalam cinemas and culture is unapologetically patriarchal and regressive. Right? It is shaped by men, for men, of men, and women are treated as second-class citizens. Right? I'll tell you why this doesn't spill out into movies. Was that recently I watched this clip. I don't know where it was from. It was basically a Malayali man, probably seemingly from a lower caste, who was speaking to the camera, who was speaking to an audience, saying, "Look, there is something that you women need to be aware of. Right? There is a language that we use in your presence to describe you, and then there is a language that we men use to describe you when you are not around. Right? And both are very different, and the way we treat is very, very different." And he says the same thing applies for caste also. The way you talk to me when I am in your presence is very different from the way you refer to me when I am not in your presence, right? So what does this mean is that casteism and patriarchy, misogyny, etc., are always there, but they are undercurrents that you cannot voice out in a public forum, which means that your movies essentially, have to punch above and punch up, right? Which means that those will not play out. Of course, it is misogynistic. Of course, it is patriarchal. Of course, it is casteist. But in the reflection of movies, you will never see it play out because you are aspiring to a little higher degree of nuance and sophistication. I think that's the difference.
I'll push you again there. Why is it more true? And this should be equally true for other parts of the country, right? In that case.
Hi, you tell me that I'm not representing all parts of the country. What the hell? You are mistaking me for your local councillor or MP who you don't even know. Bloody. Go and ask him, no, why is the road dug up? Why are Indians always spitting?
Amazing. I'm a Keralite and I'm a Malayali who grew up in Madras and then spent most of his adult life in Bangalore. So I'm actually best placed to tell you about all and actually tell you nothing about why everything is so different. It's firstly interesting that the 4 southern states, or 5 if you include Telangana now, have very, very distinctively different behaviors to each other. On the other hand, if you look at the northern parts, and I'm sure North Indian friends will correct me here, but there is a lot more of a monoculture that's prevalent in the north of the country, right? And one of the reasons is what you call the Hindi belt, right? Which starts somewhere around Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, and goes all the way down to almost Bihar, right? That Hindi belt coincides very neatly with the Gangetic plains, and that's how the river of Ganga flows. And the logic that I was reading upon why there is more of a monoculture in the north and very distinctive cultures in the south is the north of India over the years was typically ruled by the same ruler, right? The same ruler would come from a different kingdom each time, but whoever got control of one of those states managed to get control of all of those states because it was also easy for them to travel from one state to another. And one of the reasons why Hindi is now the dominant language in the north and a lot of the local languages, well, they continue to remain, are actually dwindling in their importance or relevance because most people default to Hindi. Whereas if you look at the south, right, it was never actually easy to travel from one state to another. And these borders that exist between the 4 southern states were actually real physically difficult borders to cross, apparently. Yes, there was the Kaveri River, for instance, flows across states. The Periyar River flows across states, but it was not an easily navigable river, unlike the Ganges was, right? And as a result, these various states, through majority portions of their history, were actually ruled by different kings. Right, you had the Cheras, Cholas, Pandavas, Pallavas, right? These are the 4 broad dynasties that people talk about. The cultures never got a chance to mix as much as they did in the north, which meant they ended up actually becoming very, very distinct. Now, by a small quirk of fate, the fact that Kerala happens to be on the western coast as opposed to Tamil Nadu, which is on the eastern coast, also meant that Kerala had access to travelers from the Persian side of the world, right? And if you look at the early settlers in Kerala, you had Jews, you had Syrians, you had obviously Arabs coming, you had Portuguese coming over to Kerala. Tamil Nadu, of course, did not have all that. It broadly had the Brits, right? And Pondicherry had the French settlement, right? So the influences that it had from outside were significantly lesser. And what actually ended up happening there was instead of people coming into Tamil Nadu from other parts of the world, what Tamil Nadu actually became a net exporter of people, right? A lot of people moved to the Southeast Asia, even the Caribbean and Africa. But as part of this was more like indentured labor that was exported from Tamil Nadu to other places. Whereas Kerala initially was actually it used to actually get a lot more, got more varieties of ideas coming in. And you see that even now that, the Syrian beef fry that is very popular in Kerala continues to be such a remarkable dish. And it's a kind of dish that you might not get anywhere else in India, right? Even now, I think the Hindu population of Kerala, I might be wrong, but it's roughly about 60%. And there's no other part of the country that has such a low Hindu population, right? You have a significant Muslim population, a significant Christian population. And I think it is this amalgam of ideas that Kerala was somehow subject to. And because of the unique quirk of our southern geography, was not allowed to actually spread that to the other states as easily. And that Kerala sort of developed in its own way. At least that's the bit that I seem to have gathered from whatever little research I did, right? I don't claim that any of this is correct, but it makes for convenient Chris attack type narratives, so I will happily indulge in them. But you can also see that in the way the languages have evolved, right? Like Malayalam has a lot more influence of Sanskrit in it than any of the other 3 South Indian languages. The other 3 South Indian languages largely borrow from Tamil. Malayalam and Tamil also borrow from each other, but these are Dravidian languages. Malayalam, on the other hand, I think has a lot more Sanskrit influence. And language, by the way, is a very, very strong proponent of culture. I asked that question, the facetious question earlier, right? Are people shaped by pop culture or does pop culture get influenced by people? This question actually is worth asking when it comes to language. Because while trying to understand why Kerala and Tamil Nadu are different from each other, I thought of, okay, are there other such places in the world that are actually different from each other despite being very close to each other? So France and Germany and literally the entire Eurozone is, small countries that are separated by pretty much nothing. You can just walk over from one country to another, right? And now it's literally open because it's one passport and all of that. But I went into Wikipedia, I went into Google and asked, why are the French and the Germans so different from each other, despite living in such close proximity? And you know that irritating thing where you ask Google a question, Google has understood your question, but it is giving you the wrong answers. I am obviously asking Google to tell me why the French people are different from the German people. But the answer that Google gave me was the wrong answer, because it gave me, why is French language different from German language? As it happens, French and German can refer both to the people and to the language. But while Google gave me the wrong answer, indirectly it was giving me the right answer also, because language actually shapes the way people think and the way people evolve.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at it, right, all the stereotypes that people say about Germans being very logical in the way they think, while French being more, argy-bargy, people who love to smell wine, drink wine, and, have a good time. A lot of this actually comes from the languages itself, right? Like French is a romantic language. It originates from the Roman Empire. German is a Germanic language, right? It's a very different, the structure of that language is very different. There's logic inbuilt into the way the German language is shaped, right? Obviously, people who use that language, which is imbued with its own grammar of logic, tend to be more grammatical and more logical in the way they think about things, life, the way they behave, the way they lead their lives. And maybe there is something of that kind. I don't think we'll, in this 1 hour of leftover lasagna, I don't think we are going to crack. Spoiler alert.
The TLDR is we don't know.
Spoiler alert. Watch Drishyam part 27, where Kamal Haasan and Mohanlal meet each other. And they will actually explain the difference to you. But for now, we are keeping it secret, much like George Kutti. But
I think the other trope that is worth exploring is why does Tamil Nadu always need a Rajnikant or an MS Dhoni, right? Like why do these characters still get played? Like so my dad has worked both in Tamil. I was born in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
Incidentally,
Yeah.
we spent 4 years in Tamil Nadu. We spent several years in Kerala. But the difference always has been like everyone would. In that sense, fall over my dad's feet, calling him sir, because he's probably, and he was in sort of rural areas, right, like Kambam, Teni, and Rameshwar, Ramnad, and all that. So it meant that he was always like the chief guest for any function in a school or whatever, although being like a junior employee of the telephones department. Is that I guess like not everyone, probably education and literacy was not accessible to everyone, right? And you automatically had a reverence for anyone who was maybe slightly more educated. And also, you're not looking at your own resources to maybe, I don't know, deal with life. You're looking at someone to come and save you from this situation that you find yourself in, right? So I don't know. To your language point, is it a more fantastical, romantic language where it's always believed in myth and maybe more theistic than the atheistic logic of communism in that sense? But I don't think that's the case. Like, what is it? Why do you still love an MS Dhoni who can't even walk, who can't complete a double without clutching his knee?
No, so multiple thoughts to my mind, none of which are probably going to answer your question, but these are interesting thought starters, right? And what is leftover lasagna if it's not just opening more and more brackets without actually closing them? So interesting point about Tamil Nadu, right?
Put everything in the fridge. Take it, put it in the fridge. And then revisit it later.
Firstly, I would say, see, it's not so much that Tamil Nadu is the exception here. Kerala is the exception, because Kerala is where you don't have the greater man syndrome. Every other part of at least the southern...
This is true.
Yeah. Maybe I think, and there is some correlation to be drawn between communism, consumption of fish and love for football, because Bengal and Kerala, as people...
Bengal
and Kerala are those, they stand out as...
full of insufferable men who think they know everything.
Yeah.
We drink and we know things.
Yet, I'll also point out this paradox, right? While both, and Bengali cinema also is a fantastic kind of industry that runs by itself. I don't know how true that is anymore, but at least from, the Satyajit Ray and the Rituparna Ghosh era of cinema was almost a parallel cinema movement, very, very different from what every other mainstream industry was turning out, right? I don't know if that's still true. But even for these two exceptions, Kerala, like you mentioned, I know all of Kerala gets behind Sanju Samson, right? When he's playing, and I think all of Kerala now supports Rajasthan Royals just because their superstar, which is Sanju Samson, plays for them. And similarly, Bengal, while being communist and, egalitarian and all of that, the kind of unabashed love and even irrational love that they had for Saurav Ganguly, who was that one superstar that emerged from their state, right? And without going into the merits of a Srishant or a Sanju Samson or a Ganguly, right? These are obviously great cricketers. But I think the kind of love they had actually is a paradox to the point that we are making. And I'll say even Mohanlal and Mammootty for that matter, right? While they might not be superstars in the way your Khans, or
Yeah.
your Rajnikant or whoever or
Yeah.
Chiranjeevi is, they have their own cult following in Kerala and in and around Kerala. Kerala's movie industry, and I must point this out, is smaller by design, right? Because they make movies on a much smaller budget than the other industries, and they believe in making. If they had 100 crores, they would make 10 films costing 10 crores and hope that 6 of them become hits, as opposed to say the Telugu industry, which would try and make 100 crore film, which if it does well becomes a Bahubali, if it doesn't, it sinks without a trace, right? So I think that's more a culture aspect and also an industry aspect to it. But I wanted to point out that paradox,
Yeah.
right? That Mohanlal and Mammootty are as big
Yeah.
stars.
No, I think again the difference is, right. Malayalam cinema being writer led means that if there is a superstar who charges more than an X amount, he'll just be written out. Right? Now, if you look at Malayalam movies, it's not even Tovino who is the main hero, right? It is Basil Joseph, who started out as a director, looks like nothing important.
Yeah.
Is that if the writing works, then like the actor is immaterial, right? Like there will be enough people who can portray that character convincingly, and although he's probably, I don't know, 5'5" or whatever, dark, not conventionally good looking, he's like a sweetheart of the masses, right? And the point being that you can write out people out very easily, which brings me to an interesting point, right? Is that in the last episode you spoke of why Mahakumbh and like how people are going because they don't have sort of any other hopes, right? And in some senses, right, like I don't think the current disposition, just to get a little political here, started out when they started out with the idea that we'll make people unemployable and therefore they will have no other option but to rely on God. But it turned out to be one of those Urvashi Shapam Upaharamai kind of things, right? Where basically they said, okay, we can't create jobs. What does this lead to? Youngsters have no other option but to find some valor in something meaningless.
Right.
So they will go and beat up someone or harass someone and become a WhatsApp video hero for their community, and that is what they get their jollies from. So similar kind of thing is that Malayalam cinema has always been limited in resources, right? And which also means that it is a small state at the end of the day. You won't get a large film that collects crores and crores of rupees, right? Like 100 crores is definitely an exception, which has happened multiple times recently, but otherwise you'd never expect that to be the case. And therefore, I think this is an interesting sort of blessing that Malayalam cinema has got. For a Hindi cinema, it means that to cater to so many states
Absolutely.
and cultures, you necessarily have to draw out the lowest common
Absolutely.
denominator, right?
No.
And you get the Karan Johar kind of film, which is set in Switzerland with generic hero and all of that, which means you're necessarily building for that 100 crore film, right? Whereas Malayalam cinema knows this is not possible, and instead of what you cannot translate is context, nuance, and culture.
Yeah.
Right? And you're saying that there is no point in trying to subtitle this to an audience that doesn't understand it. Instead, what will we do? We will double down on this nuance and this culture and go into subcultures and write it so much so that people do not expect to get all of the layers, but write it so convincingly that if you actually look at an intelligent enough audience which comes to theaters with brains,
Yeah.
they will watch it and they will love it for this nuance which you will find nowhere else, because it is unique, right? And
Yeah.
as much as you say there is a new wave of Malayalam cinema, each damn movie is different from the other, right? And unabashedly so. There is no formula because you are
Because that
not
is the
looking
form-
at it
yeah.
in terms of if I don't make 100 crores, I'll go bust.
No,
Right?
no.
It is okay.
No.
So that I think is a big blessing.
No, that's a beautiful point, and it ties back to what we spoke earlier about monoculture, right? You can blame everything from, the problem of polluted waters and people falling ill to the problem of Karan Johar films that are making everyone ill on the Ganges. Because the reason, it is all because of the monoculture, right? Because Karan Johar has to make that filth, because there is no other way he can cater to such a huge audience, which is exactly what you said, and you will always default to the lower common denominator. Now, one paradox that I wanted to point out: while Tamils are obviously known for being extremely jingoistic, extremely they take excessive pride in their language, right? And I've been exposed to this. I learned Tamil in school for 12 years because I grew up in Chennai, and for some reason I continued to take Tamil as my second language, despite the fact that you couldn't score any marks in it, and the quantity of the portions, the amount of stuff that we had to cram in Tamil was like 20x what people were doing for Sanskrit and Hindi and French and other languages, right? It's because people are just crazy about the Tamilians are crazy about Tamil. And maybe one of the reasons for that is that it is one of the oldest languages, right? And it is such an old language that it actually predates Sanskrit. And there is a lot of really, really old, special, I wouldn't say special, but very old and venerated literature that was written in Tamil. And a lot of these stories from the past are about heroes, right? You take our epics, while they're obviously very beautiful, textured and layered stories, at the heart of hearts, they are about, heroes. The Ramayana is about Ram at the end of the day and about his life.
Oh, really? Spoiler alert.
If you did not know the Drishyam story and you did not know Ramayana and you're still watching Leftover Lasagna, you have come to the right place. No, so I don't know how much of the greater man syndrome that afflicts Tamil cinema, and I know this doesn't answer. Maybe this to some extent answers why it is equally true for the other South Indian states as well, because like I said, Tamil was the root language for the other states as well. I don't know how many people are going to kill us for saying all these random stuff with no fun days at all. So please,
No one's listening. That's okay.
no one's listening. See, no one cares, but some people do. But I don't know how much of that, how much of the hero syndrome comes from the fact that we are so strongly wedded to our language. Tamilians are so strongly wedded to their language, and that language largely spoke about, uprisings, about the local hero who will come and save the day when the chips are down and so on. Now, while Tamil Nadu has always picked its heroes, right? And if you were to trace that lineage, you go back 50 years, you had MGR, who went on to become chief minister, had a very decorated film career before that, which pitchforked him into politics. The heir to MGR's cinema legacy was Rajnikant, right? Who, due to a series of missteps from his own side, did not actually get into politics and ended up not becoming chief minister. Otherwise, he very much should have, right? And while there are many actors who claim to be the next Rajnikant, no, because it is, they see that the throne has been vacated. One of the front runners in that race is Ajit Kumar, right? Tala Ajit, as we spoke about, right? And much like Kerala, Tamil Nadu also, despite being very passionate about cricket, has not produced international cricketers of great quality, unlike a Bombay or a Delhi have managed to, like in spades, right? Which is why someone like an R. Ashwin has been celebrated so much by Tamil Nadu, because we just don't have heroes, who have emerged from the state of Tamil Nadu, much like Sanju Samson is a poster boy for Kerala. Now, the one person Tamil Nadu took as its own is, of course, MS Dhoni, who is not from Tamil Nadu. But try explaining that to a 10-year-old kid in Chennai. He would not believe that Dhoni is not Tamilian, because he has been so imbued into that culture. So, I mentioned 4 names here, right? MGR, Rajnikant, Tala Ajit, and Dhoni. All these 4 guys are not Tamilians. They don't hail from Tamil Nadu.
Oh, wow.
MGR is from Kerala. Rajnikant is a Marathi.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, and Ajit, I think, is half Sindhi, half Tamil. And Dhoni, of course, is from Jharkhand, right? Now, this is a very interesting thing, right? This place that takes so much pride in its own culture, history, and its own people and its own language has actually embraced heroes from outside. And it's a paradox that nobody can explain. It's very, very unique, and it's actually special in some way. I don't think it says anything about Tamil Nadu per se, but it's interesting. Now, the logic around, why greater man syndrome and why it does not exist in Kerala, of course, you touched upon communism. Now, communism, of course, means that there is no single hero, and it also means that the people as a whole will always decide for themselves, and there will be no oppression from a single unified entity, whether that's a company, whether it's government. This, of course, has shaped Malayalam cinema, like you said, and I wouldn't want to contest that. I think it's true, right? And cinema really is the real democracy, because while the stars get all the money and all the fame, the number of people involved in putting together a film are so many, right? Innumerable number of people, not just the writer. From that light boy to the person doing makeup, to the person who is in charge of logistics, to the associate director, to hundreds of different people who sit on every movie set. Everyone contributes to give you that film, right? At the end of the day. And Kerala is probably that place where and actually Kerala is now a hotbed for great technicians who are working not just in Malayalam industry, but around the country, have gone and are doing great work out there, right? So that's one. But at the same time, it's the same reason why Kerala does not have any industry to speak of. While you had this wonderful state, the first state to hit 100% literacy, you did not have jobs for those people in your own country. Like you said, while the Mahakumbh wasn't a planned agglomeration of people this year, where the government didn't plan that people won't have jobs and hence lots of people will show up to absolve their sins, as we said. Much like that, Kerala's export to the Gulf wasn't really planned. It was largely a very literate group of people who did not actually have avenues to work in their own state.
Correct.
And ended up, having to go to the Gulf. So people, when they had that opportunity. So this is an interesting thing, right? In the 80s and 90s, a lot of people who went to the Gulf from Kerala initially were actually Muslims. And not the Hindus and the
Correct.
Christians have also followed now, but it was really the Muslims, and
Yeah.
that's a huge population. And you know what visa a lot of these people went on when they went to the Gulf?
The Hajj visa.
The Hajj visa, exactly. There's a name for that visa. I forget what that name is. And then there was a crackdown, and these people had to get different kind of visa permits and all of that. But that's how that line got established. And you could actually say the reason why Malayalis went to the Gulf is because a lot of people from the Gulf and from Persia actually came and settled in Kerala, and there was a comfort across cultures and obviously religion, which helped in that exodus. I wouldn't say exodus because it's actually really helped the state of Kerala, because the remittances from the Gulf is massive. And
You're the final one.
oh yeah, yes. I live in the capital of Kerala. It's also known as Dubai. Yes, absolutely. I am one of those. I am that person. Yeah.
No, so this is the interesting thing is that you're basically talking about like geographical differences, right? And it was probably easier to cross the seas from the Arabian Sea to Gulf than to cross over the Ghats into Tamil Nadu or one of the other.
Or you can't go into
Although Tamil
Karnataka
and
because
Malayalam-
you'll get stuck at Silk Board flyover.
That's definitely been an influence, right? Because all of these cultures have first started out in Kerala. Like Christianity started out in Kerala long before it went to
Yeah.
Europe, right? Similar to Islam and all Judaism and most things that came by sea. That's it.
One of the things that really amazes me, right, is if you go outside of Tamil Nadu, right, you don't see too many Tamilians. And Tamilians are very distinctive in the way they behave, the way they talk, everything, right? Outside of Tamil Nadu, you don't see them, right? Things change very quickly in India. But you have massive Tamil influence when you go to Southeast Asia. And even before...
The other sea.
Exactly. And this is not just the indentured labor that the British sort of engendered. This exists from the Chola kingdom, from the Chola era. Those people back then actually built boats that could take people from Tamil Nadu all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, and beyond. And it just blows my mind that was possible, right? Like it's quite something. Yeah. Anyway.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we have climbed mountains and crossed seas and reached back.
Yeah.
For the exact same place.
We tried to understand why Tamil people and Kerala people are different. We started from Malayalam cinema and Tamil cinema. We spoke about Drishyam. We spoke about Papanasam. We somehow found that Karan Johar makes shit films because of the Ganges. The only way Karan Johar can absolve himself of his sins is by taking a dip not in the Mahakumbh, but in Papanasam.
In Papanasam. Amazing. Yeah. And sacrifice a Pothukutti with George Gutti. Have some nice appam and beef.
Pothukutti.
Pothukutti is a...
baby cow.
Calf, yeah.
There
you go.
Tony, at the end of this episode, I want you to recommend 2 films that you have never mentioned so far on this podcast to our listeners. Obviously in Malayalam. So please don't say Premalu again. I think they've already got it. But mention 2 films that you would... writerly films that you want to recommend to our audience.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned Super Sharanya before, but
you have.
The Girishi is... Oh, I have. Okay. Let me okay, this is... it may or may not work for you, but I really love this film called Munnariyappu.
Oh yeah, Mammootty, I've seen that film. It's so good.
2008.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy Max film.
The other one.
He's in prison and he's writing. Oh my God, you should please watch Munnariyappu. I think it really was the prequel. Munnariyappu literally means forewarning. And I think that film which came in 2008 was the forewarning of what Mammootty is going to be up to in the next 15 years or so. We have spoken extensively about Mohanlal in this episode. But the real star for me is Mammootty and what he has done in the last 5-6 years in Malayalam cinema. It's been just incredible. But
yeah. The other one that I'll recommend, take one of 2. One is Anjali Menon, who obviously wrote Ustad Hotel. The first films she wrote / directed was this film called Manjadi Kuru, or Lucky Red Seeds, I think is the English translation. But it's a little bit artistic, but very, very nicely done. The other one, if you want to go by Chekhov's gun territory, is probably something like Ilavida Punchira,
Oh, yeah.
which was a recent movie,
Yeah.
but also a superbly written movie in that sense, right? With a limited space where the entire sort of movie unfolds. So,
Yeah.
take your pick of three.
Amazing. Yeah.
Have you seen Manjari Guru, Nitin?
I have not seen Manjari Kuru. I watched the other two, and they're both very worthy recommendations. Absolutely. All right. On that note, that was episode number whatever it is of Leftover Lasagna. Please let us know in your comments. Sorry, please let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything or everything that we said, and we will humbly agree to whatever you say. And join us again in a few days for another episode of Leftover Lasagna. Please tell your friends from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu, from the Gangetic Plain. Tony believed that this was a very restrictive topic, but I believe we have done justice to it and opened facets to it which would make it interesting to people even outside of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So please recommend this to your Bhojpuri friends.
This is interesting, right? On this episode, I was the one talking about how Malayalam took the limitation of saying, you don't need to universalize everything. You can basically talk about nuance. Whereas I am the one actively rebelling against it when we are making a podcast episode, saying, how do we not restrict it to the audience of 3 out of 10 that listens?
But that is the whole point. A well-said story is a well-said story, which is what I was trying to say, right? Like,
There you go.
At the end of the day, people are not different. We all need the same things. We are all fundamentally wired the same way. And all you need to do is make small differences, add a small river near the bank in the climax scene, and the same movie can translate to a different audience very, very well. So if that doesn't work, just get subtitles. Yeah, that does the job too.
No, we love subtleties, not subtitles. So there we go. On
Brilliant.
that note, join us again, hopefully next week.
We shall do it next week. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.